What up, everybody? Welcome to Harry Dating Convos. This is where we talk about relationships and ways for you to better yourself so you can find the love that you truly desire. I'm your host, as always, Harry Wilmington, and it's Sunday. And I don't normally do Sunday shows, but I felt compelled to do this particular show on Sunday. And we're going to be talking about the delusion of waiting for God to bring the one into your dating life. And I'm doing this show because I got up this morning, I was looking through videos, and I came across a woman she just recently started a show, but she's 31, she's a comedian, and she was talking about how up to this point of her life, she has yet to have a single solitary boyfriend. And she was saying how basically she grew up in the church, she was a Christian, and up until this year, she hadn't really put a lot of effort forth in dating because she just figured, quite honestly, based on what she was taught, that when the time permits itself, God would bring somebody into her life that would be the perfect person, and then they would have a relationship. But now that she's 31, about to turn 32, she's realizing, oh, that hasn't really worked out. And so I probably need to put some work into this. But I've seen a lot of videos late of both men and women talking about how they're now in their late 20s, their early 30s, close to 40, and they have yet to have a boyfriend. Some of them have yet to go out on dates. And many of these people happen to also grow up in the church, are Christian or Catholic or Jewish or whatever. And they've just been told their whole lives that, well, when that right person comes along, or when God has the timing for you to have it be done, then you'll also be in your own positive relationship, or God's got that person and it's still molding them. And I myself grew up in the Baptist church, and so I've grown up around similar teachings where, you got to wait on God's timing. You got to be a virgin until your wedding day, and you got to make sure that you're on the up and up with people and let them know that you're, doing it on God's timing. And I just want to be here to tell you all that is a bunch of baloney. Like, I think there are lessons in the church as it pertains to love and dating and sex that are actually meaningful and worth following. But I also believe that the idea of you being told that God has a special timing for you, or that one person for you, is what is keeping a lot of you single, because it's just not true. Like, we could argue that, oh, you've seen people before who got into these so-called perfect relationships, and they got married in the church, they met each other serendipitously, and it just so happened that they matched on these things, and it looks like God put them together. And what I want to do today is dispel some of these things for you, because you could be using this as a crutch to not put yourself out there and to not do the work that it requires to actually find the right person and get into a relationship. I do believe that God, on his end of things, can in fact do his part to help you get a mate. But to put all of the onus onto God specifically to help you find that person and be like, I ain't got to do nothing but just wait for God, I think that is going to result in you potentially being single forever, or for at least longer than you need to be. Like, this idea, like the woman I saw in the video, again, she's 31, and she waited until just 31 to start realizing she's got to put in her own work. But the reality is, if she had been putting in the work, she could have found somebody in her early 20s, mid 20s, at 30. My mom got married at 23. My brother, he's been married to his wife since he was 25 and she was 24. Like, and these have all been perfect matches that one could argue, oh, it looks like God had a hand in this. Yeah, but also they had to put themselves out there. They had to do the work. They had to make sure that other men, or if you're a guy watching this, other women have to know that you exist. And so many people these days are sitting at home or just going to work, going to the office, going back home, and thinking, woe is me, God hasn't brought me anybody, and they're not putting themselves out there. And so you got to ask yourself, is it really God's timing, or is it the fact that you're not doing your part to get out there? So we're going to talk about all that on today's show. I have a litany of notes, and since this is Sunday, yes, I also found a few passages in the Bible that will facilitate and better or hopefully persuade you to understand that as much as God is going to be there for you in you trying to find a mate, that he also wants you out there doing your part, and there's reasons behind that. So let's get into all of that. So to start off with, let's talk about this idea of waiting for the one and the misconceptions that come behind that, all right? So for one thing, the biggest problem I have with the concept of the one or finding the one or waiting for the one is that there are opportunities all around you right now to be able to find somebody to get with. God did his part. God created an earth that is designed to self-populate itself to create a wide variety of people, both men and women, to choose from. So on any given day, even if you're a person that just stays home or goes from home to work, back to home, there are so many opportunities that God has created for you to find a person to get with. But there's this idea that people have that God is just going to mysteriously drop one single solitary person into your lap. But the reality is God made the earth so that way we would have options to choose from. And so even though you're thinking God's going to bring one person, on a day-to-day basis, you have interactions that keep you open for a wide variety of people to choose from. Let's think about, you get up in the morning and you commute to work. You might be, if you have a car, you're driving to work. If you're without a car, you're catching the bus or a train, right? So let's say you're catching the bus or a train. In the course of that, how many people do you pass walking to the bus or walking to the train? How many people then are on the train? How many people do you pass getting off the train or the bus to go to your job? And this is especially true in cities like LA, Atlanta, New York, where they have these kinds of modes of transportation to where even if you did have a car, you could also be catching these modes of transportation to a job. So you're already passing by a lot of people that. But let's say you drive to work, right? You drive to work, you park your car, you're in the parking lot. You have to walk from the parking lot to your office. On the way from the parking lot to the office, how many people are you passing up? Then you go to your place of work. I assume you have a place to work. If you're working at home, even then, you have clients coming in, you have emails. There's some way where you're interacting with people at the job that you do. How many of those people are also single that are of the opposite sex and that you could potentially be having conversations or interactions with? Are you taking up those opportunities? Then, lunch break comes. Most people I know that have a regular job go out to lunch. They go to a restaurant, they go to a mall where there are tons of people walking around. There are people in line. Like, how many opportunities do you have to stand in line waiting for food and starting up a conversation with somebody of the opposite sex? How many opportunities do you have to be sitting down at lunch by yourself and next to you there's tables of other people, both men and women, that are also by themselves? How much opportunity do you have to just go up to somebody and say, hey, I notice you're eating alone. Can I eat with you in chat? Because I don't want to have lunch alone. Because most people, even if they're doing it, don't want to eat lunch alone. Then you go back to your office, you work the rest of the day, and maybe you drive straight home. Or maybe you decide, you know what? I had a great day at work today. I'm going to go to a happy hour. So you go to a happy hour, and there you are at the bar sitting by yourself. How many opportunities do you have of other people that are sitting around this bar at happy hour with nobody else to talk to? Or maybe you see a group of girls with their girlfriends, you see a bunch of guys with their guy friends, and they have no women there. They don't have rings on their fingers, so they're pretty much single, and there's opportunity there to talk to them. Are you taking advantage of that opportunity? Maybe you decide after happy hour, you know what? It's such a nice day. You want to walk home. You're walking home and people are just passing by you left and right. Some of them single, some of them with people, some of them with dogs. How many opportunities are you taking to be able to talk to these people? So as you can see, just from this one day, we're not even including weekends where you have your entire day free to get out there, to go to the beach, to go to a restaurant, to hang out with friends who may know other people that you don't know yet that you could also gel with. Like, God has already created so many opportunities for us to meet other people. And we just want to sit there and be like, but he's going to tell me which one's the one, and he's going to just drop him into my lap, and it's not going to be an issue. My thing is this: God has done his part. Think of it like this, right? That'd be like if you were a person that likes to go fishing and you go to the pond and be like, oh my God, I hope a fish is going to just jump into my boat so I can take it home and eat because I'm really starving. And it's like, dude, God made like a fish reel and a line and worms to be able to help you better catch these things. So yes, the fish are abundant, but are you using the current bait that is out there that is going to allow you to catch the woman that you want or the man that you want? That was a really great analogy. I just thought of that on the fly. Anyway, so yeah, so understand that, again, God is making he's already made ways for you to meet people. And I'm saying this because I don't want you to be sitting around waiting forever thinking that at some point the one's going to happen. I myself have relatives in my family, both male and female. I know specifically I have an aunt that's like in her mid-70s. She always wanted love. She always wanted marriage. She always wanted a family. She always wanted children. And she never put herself out there. And she just kept saying, well, you know, she was going to church every week. Well, eventually God's going to bring the one to me if it's meant to be or whatever. And now she's in her mid-70s and she lives by herself and she has no kids. And I think it's sad because she's a really great person, but she just kept believing that if it's meant to be, God will bring someone. And that's what I call the delusion of religion. This idea that God is so powerful that he's like Santa Claus. Like you just put out a wish there and then you just make something happen without you having to do a single solitary thing. And so you're sitting there waiting like Christmas Eve, like, oh my God, God's going to bring me this person. God's going to bring me the thing I'm asking for any moment now. It doesn't work that way, you know? To quote the scripture, let's go into quoting some scripture here for a minute. So first scripture of the day, James chapter 2, verse 17. This is from the New International Version. And the verse says, in the same way, by faith itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. And this is the idea that it's great to have faith. It's great to believe that God's going to have something happen for you. But if you're not putting in some work to show him why you're even deserving of the thing you're wanting, then you're not going to get the thing that you want. And this goes for your love life as well. It's great to pray to God, oh, please bring me a insert your religion person that's going to be by my side and be there for me. But also, are you now going out there and talking to people? If you're a person that goes to church or the mosque or whatever, are you going to those places and intermingling with people and doing that with the intended purpose of also trying to see who you can better get to know that could potentially be somebody that you get into a relationship with? Now, some people fight back on that because they think, well, no, church is a place of worship and I don't want to, be distracted and, try to do things. But you're also looking for a person that is your same religion. And that is like one of the best places to find somebody. And there's a lot of people that go to church these days that are also single. Now, on the women's side of things, it's mostly women going, so that sucks. And there's reasons why guys tend to like steer away from the church. But also, I'm here in LA where there are churches where there are an equal amount of men and women that are all single. Why aren't these people trying to get together? And that speaks to, honestly, not knowing the steps to do, but also some other various things that I'll touch on later. But suffice to say, that opportunity is like right there. You have faith and you're going to church and you're praying for a person, but are you taking that last step of initiating and putting yourself out there to those people? If you're not, then that could be what's holding you back. And there's, again, more reasons behind that I'll get into later. But suffice to say, yeah, faith without works is dead. You having faith that God's going to bring you somebody without putting the work in. And people will think, well, I'm putting the work in on myself. That's part of it. But the other part is putting work into doing the steps you need to do to go forth and actually, put yourself out there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's this illusion of love that people have, of love being a thing that just magically happens. And a lot of this is due to, unfortunately, media. We have songs out there talking about, I just happen to find somebody, or you see all these movies, like these romantic comedies, especially the ones that women love to watch, where it's like, oh, this guy and this girl just ran into each other at a store and they just happen to find each other. Let's cue the music. Let's cue the hearts playing and them going through a love journey. And it just happened to all work out. The reality is, and this is guys too. Guys do this also because they have this thought that, well, if love is meant to be, it's just going to be a thing that just happens to work out, where the other person I get with, they just know me so well and there's no problems whatsoever and it just always works great. There's never any fights about anything. And it's all crap. It's all bull crap. Because here's the reality is that love, as much as you may think you want it to be, it is not an accident. It is not something you just fall into. Love is intentional. Love is purposeful. Love is you putting forth a plan of action that's going to allow you to know how to find that person, the kind of person you're looking out to find in the first place, and the kind of work you need to put in order to make these things happen. Again, love is not going to just happen to you. You're just sitting at home randomly and some person just falls out of the sky and lands through your roof and lands on your couch and they're the person for you. Like, it'd be great if that could happen, but that is not what's going to happen. Love takes work. Love takes you having to work on yourself to become the kind of person that you need to actually be to be attractive to a wide variety of people. And then it takes having social skills. It takes being able to understand the opposite sex that you're going for and know what their journey is and what their thought process is and what they're looking to get in order to be able to be more attracted to you. And so that stuff takes work. So this is why it behooves you to know what that work is and then go forth doing that work. So again, you're doing your part in this journey to be able to get somebody. And this is another thing whereby if you start believing that love just happens and you leave it to circumstance, then you're going to grow into an older person that is not going to find the love that you could get, or you're going to, by the time you find it, you're going to be too late to really enjoy it. Because you want to be able to enjoy love and care and affection while you're at a younger age. Because let's be real, like your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, those are all of our prime years. And you trying to say, well, I need to spend time doing whatever, and I'm going to I assume love will just happen to me at some point. You get to your 50s and 60s where, yeah, you can still enjoy it at that age, but body starts wearing down, health problems start coming in. And we're going to pray, obviously, that you're going to be alive and able to enjoy those things the same way you would at those younger ages, but that's not realistic. Like, you're going to slow down a bit more. You're not going to have as many chances to do some of the things that you would want to do. Like, I'm 42 and I already know the last time I went on some roller coasters, for example, I went like 2 years ago to this roller coaster park. I got a fast pass and I rode like 13 of the roller coasters. By the end of that trip, my back was hurting and it hurt for like 3 weeks. I recognize I'm getting older, but I'm also glad I rode a lot of roller coasters in my 20s when that wouldn't hurt my back as much. And so that kind of stuff's going to start happening. You're going to want to do stuff and it's like, oh, we can't do that anymore. But you waited so long. But why'd you wait so long? Oh, because love is just going to happen at some point. Don't live in the delusional fantasy that God's going to be sitting around being like, okay, at 45, it's time for such and such love to happen to you. That's not how this works. Because again, we have a say in how we find love and the time we're putting in. And what you're also not recognizing is that by you being so passive about love, you are actually missing out on opportunities to find your love. I'll give you an example of somebody that did not do that, right? So I had a friend a few years ago. She was at the time 34, 35-ish, and she called me all distraught, like in the middle of the night, like, oh my God, like, I'm getting older and I haven't found love yet, and this is that. And I looked at her, I was like, okay, well, she was on the phone. So I was like, okay, well, like, what are you actually doing to put yourself out there? I mean, I mostly stay at home and I'm just kind of a work at home person and this and that. And I told her point back, I said, well, the reason you're not finding love is because you're not doing anything. Like you go to work and go home. I know you're always at home, like just smoking and do whatever, and you're not really getting out there. And so I said at the time, I was like, I'm very big into dating apps, and I've been very successful at putting myself out there on dating apps and finding people and going out on dates and meeting people and finding relationships. And so you should consider that. And it was one of the few women that I've talked to that actually listened to what I said. Because I've talked to plenty of people, both men and women, about, for example, like doing dating apps. And they'll be like, oh, I can't do dating apps. That's a thing. I can't do that thing, whatever, because it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, fine, then don't do it. But I know too many people that have met people on dating apps and ended up finding the love of their lives and getting married to them. It's worth a shot. Because again, this speaks to, again, the idea that God has already created things to help us better meet people. If you're rejecting those things, then you're just keeping yourself single because you're not really actively doing all the things you could do to meet somebody. And so she listened to me. She said, okay, well, I helped her put up a dating profile. We put together some pictures for her. I, listened to her history and put together some stuff to put up on the app that would be best projecting her best self out there. And within a few months, she found a guy, and within a year and a half, she was married. And now she's got a kid that she just had like 2 months ago. So I say this to say that because she wasn't just waiting for love to happen to her and she became proactive in her journey, it only took her so long to actually find somebody that was the love of her life. But you have to ask yourself, why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you putting yourself out there? Which we'll get to in a second. But suffice to say, yeah, you sitting around thinking love's going to just magically happen to me, that's going to be a deterrent to your dating life, and it's not going to allow you to find somebody because you have to put yourself out there to actively do the thing. You know what I mean? All right. And so that actually leads to, let's see this other verse that I found in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 4. And that verse goes, quote, "Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest." And this speaks to the idea of you waiting for the ideal conditions to come along or for things to just magically happen to you in order for you to reap your harvest. And that's not how God works. God works by you put out into the universe what you want, and then God's going to sit there like, okay, I see you want that. So what are you going to do to start manifesting these things to happen to you? And then as you're doing, God then throws in even more opportunities for you to run into to get what you want. So if you're sitting at home thinking love's just going to happen, love's probably not going to happen for you. If you say, okay, I want love to happen, what can I do on my end? Maybe I can create a dating profile. I can go to a speed dating event. I can go to a networking event. I can go to church and start actually talking to more of the people around my age in the church that I think I'd want to get with. Then as you do that, God will present opportunities. He'll present that person that gels with you, or he'll present an opportunity whereby you get to meet a bunch of people and you get to go to an event of some kind where people are there talking about their lives, and maybe they go up on stage and do a testimony and you're like, oh my God, that person seems like he's pretty cool or she's pretty cool. I should go talk to them. And those opportunities now become more abundant because you're doing things that say to the universe at large that you want this to happen, and you're showing that you want that to happen by your actions, you know? Anyway, so continuing on. So then we get into, okay, so why is it that people, especially people that are in the church or that are believers, why is it that they cling to this idea so heavily that God's going to bring them a person or it's just going to magically happen to them? Well, believe it or not, it's funny that people that are believers are also people that oftentimes show the least amount of faith, especially when it comes to God and their love life. Because on the one hand, they're saying, I trust God to find me a person, but they actually have a lot of fear and they have a lot of insecurities and they have a lot of distrust, more so in themselves than in God, but in themselves to be able to actually put themselves out there and then find the person that's going to actually work for them. And there's a variety of reasons for this. For one, you potentially fear picking the wrong person because you're thinking that maybe you trust God's judgment, but you having to put in your own work means having to also trust some of your judgment. And you don't believe that God's going to give you the discernment to be able to tell the difference between somebody that's good for you and somebody that is potentially harmful to you. And they're out there. Hey, you're going to go out there in the dating world and you're going to think that a person's going to be one way and be really great and gracious to you. And then you're going to find out after dating them for a little bit, like, oh, they're actually like mean or malicious or have bad intent. And that is very well out there. But if you're putting yourself out there in the right way and you know what things you're looking for, then God will give you the level of discernment to say, okay, hey, maybe you go out with a person and you're not sure if you should date them. You out with them, you start feeling some things like this isn't quite feeling right. That's God telling you, hey, you tried him out, you put yourself out there, congratulations. I'm giving you the radar to let you know this is not the person. And what some people do, if they have like a past of not picking the right person, is they hear that radar. But then the other part of them is like, but I'm so lonely, and oh, but I can change them, and oh, but they're going to be different once they're in love with me. And that is you brushing off God's discernment, because God already told you this person's probably not it. And hey, I've done that too. I've dated people where like on that first or second date, they're telling me things about their life, or they're, doing certain things on the date. And I'm thinking at the time, based on what she's saying, I don't think this is going to gel. And then there's part of me like, but I'm horny or I'm lonely or whatever. So you should just give them a try. And time after time when I've done that, it's always resulted in that person ended up not being the right person. But if I was honest with myself, I got that discernment on date one. So don't, if you're going to be trusting of God, trust that if the wrong person comes along, his radar will come out and let you know, by whether it's from your gut or your heart or your head, this person is already telling you things you should probably just steer clear. Now you might think to yourself, well, Harry, why would God even put that person in my way in the first place if he or she's not the right person? And again, some of this is opportunities for you to practice. It's opportunities to practice being able to talk to people. It's also an opportunity to practice your discernment to see if your radar, if you can actually trust in God's radar of what he's telling you about people. And then also sometimes meeting the wrong person can also lead you to the right people, like this person, it might not be anything that they're evil for. It could be like, this person is really not lifestyle-wise the person you should get with, but they might have a brother or might have a sister that could actually work for you. So this is why I'm having you meet them in the first place. But the point is, you won't learn any of that stuff if you don't put yourself out there in the first place for that to happen. Also, there's obviously the fear of getting hurt. People hate the idea of feeling emotional pain or rejection. And I got news for you. Even if you find the right person, there's going to be times where on an emotional level, they're going to hurt your feelings. When you're getting to know them, they're not going to always know to say the right thing, or they're not going to know what things trigger you about things that happened in your past. And so that is just part of the dating journey. But you should not be relying on another person to be your end-all be-all world in the first place, or for them to be responsible for your emotional regulation. That is your job, and God's help, God's job to help you get that under control. Because I talk a lot on this channel, for those of you that are new, about being indifferent to dating. And I say indifferent in a sense of not caring about a person, but not letting things rock you so hard when things aren't going your way that you just completely distrust the entire process and it completely emotionally rattles you. Like, the better you're able to come into the dating world objectively. And I come into the dating world thinking, okay, objectively, not everybody's going to be for me, and that's fine. Some people I'm going to date, and I'm going to think that it should work out, but they're not feeling the same thing. That's fine. Other times, they're going to think that we're connected, and I'm thinking after 3 or 4 dates, this isn't it. That's also fine. But I keep a level head. I treat everybody with respect. And I go out there knowing that if I'm putting the work in, inevitably the right person or the person that's going to gel for me. Because here's the thing, I don't believe in the concept of the one, because I believe, again, God's created an abundance of people. You mean to tell me out of 4 billion people of the opposite sex that there's only one single solitary person for me? I just fundamentally don't believe that, because I believe, like, I live in California now. So whoever lives in California within my radius is probably going to be the person I pick. If I decide to move someplace else and I'm going to meet new people in that town, and then somebody in that town is going to happen to also work for me as well too. So you lessen your ability to find people when you get this idea in your head that there's only one single solitary person. Have the belief that God is an abundant enough God to have made multiple types of people that could potentially work for you, given on where you're at in the world and where your station currently is in life, okay? But with that said, other factors, people have a big fear of failure, obviously, but also there's this really big problem of perfectionism that people have. For one, they expect that the other person that comes along, if it's the person that God ordained for them, is going to be completely perfect, is going to never give them any pushback, is going to always agree with them. But also people have this idea that they themselves also need to get to a place where they're perfect before they can start dating. So you might have the illusion that, you know what, I had a lot of problems growing up and a lot of trauma, and then I'm trying to get a certain type of job, and I got to get a certain amount of money in, and I got to have a certain kind of car and a house and a dog, and then I got to make sure that I've worked my verbal skills and all this stuff, and I got to be 100% perfect before I put myself out there. And we do that because we don't want to have any kind of turmoil. We don't want to think that we're going to show any kind of part of ourselves to another person that could be imperfect, because that now exposes a vulnerability that we may be too afraid to show to other people for, we get taken advantage of, or we get teased about it, or whatever. And so this idea of perfectionism, this idea that, we're going to rely on God to make us the perfect person, and then to make our other person the other perfect person. Like, God is a perfect being, but he has not created perfect people. We are all perfectly imperfect in our own ways, but also that speaks to part of getting a connection with somebody else is so that way we can get with another person that's going to reflect onto us the things we still need to fix. There's this illusion that if we just work on ourselves by ourselves, we're going to be perfect. But trust me, you will have triggers that you're not aware of that will come out and only come out when you're with another person and they start having a conversation with you about something, and then you realize, oh, snap, I didn't know that was a trigger. Oh, crap, I didn't know that was not all the way healed in me. And you don't get that by waiting and just assuming that you need to be by yourself until you get 100% perfect. You're never going to be that way. I've been doing dating advice to guys for years. I've studied women. I've studied how dating works. I've studied communication skills. I know how to be a kind partner that's also a masculine partner, and I still get it wrong. So you will never be perfect. And I say that because I don't mind telling you guys that I'm not always perfect, because I don't want you to think you got to get to a perfect place in order for God to deem you worthy of a partner or to deem you worthy of helping you find the right person. But this speaks to, again, if you're trying to wait for that perfect timing or for that perfect moment where you're the perfect person, I got news for you, guy. You're never going to be with anybody. I got news for you, lady. You are always going to remain single, because God doesn't help those that aren't helping themselves and are not putting themselves out there. And God doesn't need you to be perfect to, quote unquote, be the perfect person for somebody else, nor should you be assuming that when a person comes along, if they have any kind of imperfections whatsoever, that they're not for you. Oh, he's not quite at $100,000 salary. Oh, she said she went through trauma as a kid and she's still working on it in therapy, but she still has small triggers here and there. Therefore, I can't, that we're all not going to be perfect. All right. So get rid of this idea that you're going to ever be perfect, or that the person God brings is ever going to be 100% perfect. That is just not reality. Real talk. And then also we have past traumas that contribute to this idea. Like, obviously, I tell you guys all the time, because I've said before on the show, especially for guys, if you meet a woman that's had past trauma, a lot of women have had past trauma, but the difference is, are they actively working on it? Are they in therapy? Have they gotten to a point where they're not going to just lash out at you because of their previous trauma? If they are, then you can still potentially date them. But if they haven't worked on it, then they're going to be looking at you as the person that's going to be causing all the new trauma that comes into her life, or she's going to be constantly taking stuff out on you based on previous stuff. And those women you do, in fact, want to avoid. But don't believe that because you had past trauma that you're not worth a relationship. Yes, you have some work to do on yourself, and I highly recommend you do it, because it's only going to help you in the long term. But this idea of, well, I went through trauma and therefore I got to work on that and get to a perfect place again, and so therefore I can't get love, and so, oh, God's going to heal me from all this trauma one day. And especially women really get into this idea of well, I'm still healing myself and working on myself. Healing and working on yourself is going to be something you do in your life forever. So please do not think that there's ever going to be this perfect day where you're completely rid of all your trauma and completely rid of all your problems. You will be into your 70s and 80s still working on that crap. But it's better to be working on it and then letting partners know, hey, I'm actively working on this. Hey, please let me know if, I start to act some weird way. Just be like, hey, is that something about you or you need to work on? It's better to do that than just assume that, well, I'm just damaged goods, so I can't get anybody yet. And then if you do notice that in yourself, recognize, because by 25, I'll be honest, the world at that point does not care about your trauma, but they only care about how your trauma is affecting them. So by 25, you should be able to start recognizing, oh, crap, I had a lot of stuff happen in my childhood. I've gone through bad dating situations. I recognize these things are there and I need to fix them. Don't be the person that recognizes your trauma and then every partner you have, well, it's because I had trauma. Again, your partner doesn't care. Your partner just cares, but are you working on the trauma? And God cares. God cares that, hey, you know what? You went through some traumatic stuff, and so you can pray to me. I'm here to help you, but also, are you actively doing the part on earth that you need to do to emotionally regulate yourself to be ready for a relationship? And some people, they don't want to do the work, and then they just say, but again, if God has that perfect person, then they'll just accept me as I am, flaws and all, and trauma and all. And that is not the other person's responsibility to deal with your trauma. It's just not. So you can be mad about it, but it is what it is. So let's get into the importance of being intentional in dating. Because here's the thing. You waiting around for God to just drop somebody into your lap, it shows him that you don't actually have any intentionality on your end. If you had an idea of the kind of guy you wanted, and then we're actively trying to go after those kind of guys specifically, or you're a guy that's thinking, okay, I really want God to bring a woman into my life, but you're not actively telling him what you want, or you're not actively putting yourself in areas whereby you could potentially meet that person. If you're a guy that's like, I want a woman that's really high class, and then you're going to strip clubs, I got news for you. You're not putting yourself in situations where you're going to meet a high class woman. And so you need to have intentionality in your dating so God knows where to steer this ship. So you got to understand that it's important to make intentional moves. You need to be able to know how to meet people, where to meet them. You need to know about dating, how to date. For men specifically, the plans of actions for dating, where you're going to take women on dating. You need to be open to the idea of relationships in the first place, and understanding that part of intentionality means you putting in the work to be able to effectively find the person that you want to get with. And so There's this verse in Second Thessalonians 3:10 that says, "For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: the one who is unwilling to work shall not eat." So that's basically God saying, hey, God is with you. He's there to help you out, not to do all for you. And so the reality is, if you're unwilling to put yourself out there and you're just putting it all on God, you are not going to find that person. Again, I refer you to the video I talked about earlier, the woman who's 31 years old and is just now starting to put work in on dating after waiting years for God to just bring her a person and having the epiphany that, oh, maybe I should actually be putting myself out there. Like, I've been sitting at home. Maybe I should be going out more. She's a comedian. She goes to comedy clubs. She's in church. She goes to church to meet people. And at no time did she think, hey, I need to do my part. Because to be fair, again, in the church, a lot of women are told, he that finds, it says in the Bible, he that finds a woman finds a good thing. And so women, all you got to do is just sit there and a guy's going to find you. And that's the lie that women have been told. And that's why a lot of them think, well, if I just sit around, a guy's going to just come to me and say, hey, you're the one. And he'll just start paying for me and just treat me whatever. And it's a lie that I wish they wouldn't teach in the church, because so many women abide by that. So many women abide by this idea of, well, I can't make any moves and it's against God if I make a move. And he told me to just sit here and wait. And women end up in their 50s and 60s and 70s, in the words of Kevin Samuels, getting pets and dying alone because they believe that crap. Do not believe that crap, women. And guys too, because guys, you're thinking the perfect woman's going to just walk by and you ain't got to put any kind of approach in. You ain't got to put any kind of date in. You ain't got to try to do anything on your end, because if she's the perfect woman, she'll just know that we love each other and I don't have to impress her. She'll just know that, between my love and God's love will work out. And that's delusional. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is women are going to walk by you because they want a guy that's going to put in some kind of effort. And God can help you put in that effort, but you just thinking it's going to be all on him, and that you don't have to do any work on people. That's going to lose you women. Real talk. So understand, people. I say all this to say that in terms of you being more intentional, here's some steps to do that. First of all, you really need to start identifying roadblocks. We could put the thing forth like, well, I just believe that God will handle it. But what's really holding you back from getting the love of your life, right? You got to look at, like, what kind of fears do you have? What kind of insecurities do you have about dating? Why are you apprehensive about this idea of putting in work or going forth and presenting yourself to other people? You got to really analyze where that comes from. I don't know you personally, so I can't speak to what you've gone through in your life. I know for me, early on in my dating journey, like not even dating journey, when I was like 5 years old, I had my very first crush on a girl, and she lived in the neighborhood. And there was one day that I got on the school bus and I literally said, oh, hey, so-and-so, how are you? And she looked at me, and she had found out, which I found later on, she found out from my brother, which I hated to death. But like, she found out that I had a crush on her. And she literally stood up on the bus and was like, I know you have a crush on me. I know you like me. I know you like me. And I'm sitting there like, no, I don't like you. What are you talking about? And she just kept saying it and saying it. And then the whole school bus was laughing at me. And so that became my excuse for never approaching women for like almost 10 to 15 years. Like, it wasn't until I was 15 that I was able to like approach a girl and be like, hey, will you be my girlfriend? And then it took another like 10 years after that. She said yes, by the way. We were dating for like 2 weeks, but suffice to say, but then like it took another like 10 years for me to get this idea of like, I can present myself, girls actually want me. I need to put myself forward in order to eventually get a yes. And so I'm going to get no's as part of the process. But eventually, if I do enough of that work, then a girl's going to want to date me. Like, that took me a minute. But I couldn't, because that was my fear and insecurity based on my incident when I was 5 years old. But if I just went through life being like, well, because a girl left me when I was 5 years old and rejected me, I just don't approach women anymore, I wouldn't be able to have the successes in dating that I've been able to have, And so, yeah, some things are going to happen that you aren't going to like and that are going to like hit at those fears and hit at those nerves. But I also found the more you do it, then those fears and insecurities become less, because you realize, oh, I got rejected, but I lived through it. Oh, thank God. Oh my God, this person doesn't want to date me, but they just said they weren't interested. Like, it didn't hurt. It wasn't a punch to the face. Hit my ego a little bit, but okay. Oh, this person doesn't want to date me. Fine. Like, you get over time more and more used to it, Secondly, yeah, you got to put yourself out there. There are so many people that say, I'm waiting for God to find me a person. God hasn't chosen that person yet. And I'll ask them, well, what do you do when you're dating? Like, how do you put yourself out there? And they'll be like, well, I go to work and go home, and then I hang out with friends sometimes, and that's it. That is not you doing your part to have God help you find a person. Like, okay, God has your person, and that person is at a networking event in Santa Monica, and you never go to networking events. How are you going to find that person? Okay, God knows that you like dancing, and so he has put your guy or your girl in a salsa class that's happening in Los Angeles. And you don't want to go out because you're afraid to go by yourself. You don't want to look like an idiot going to some dance class alone. How are you going to meet that person? Okay, fine. You know what? God has listened to your prayers. He has somebody that is actively in the church, that is in the same seat every single Sunday. But you don't want to talk to people at church because you feel awkward about approaching people, and you're kind of, socially awkward, or you feel weird about yourself. And so you don't want to do that. How are you ever going to meet that person? God has been putting people around you your entire life that you have not approached, or you have not made yourself available to even find those people. So you got to ask the question. God's doing his part. He's got people out there. Are you putting yourself out there? And so you need to start attending more social events. You need to do online dating. Yes, people, you need to do online dating. I cannot stress enough. The majority of marriages that happen today arrive from people meeting each other on dating apps. I've had great success doing dating apps. I have people that I have personally coached that are now married to people they have found on dating apps. Imagine if they were just like everybody else. Well, dating apps are just a scam and they're a hoax. Well, I always put the argument like this. You say that the dating world's trash and that online dating is trash. But yet, and still we can argue going to clubs is trash, or people in general are trash, and yet you're still putting yourself out there to meet those people, or you're open to the idea of putting yourself out there in these other various situations to meet people. Dating apps are just another avenue to meet people. That, again, we could say God has helped people create dating apps so they could find each other. Is there trash on dating apps? Yes, but there's also trash in the church, trash in your job. There's trash everywhere, but there's also good people everywhere. There are great people you can meet on online dating, but more importantly, it'll open up your pool to a variety of people, more so than you'd be able to meet just walking around the city. And you can at least vet them in advance. You can see their pictures, you can see their bio, you can have conversations before you see them in person. But that is an avenue I would not steer away from, is what I'm saying. Also, you can, ask friends. You have a social circle that hopefully you have friends that you meet up with, you have family members you meet up with that also know people in their circles, that know people that know people that know people that are single, that are out there looking, that just went through a breakup, that have been single for a long time and are ready to put themselves out there. In the olden times, that's how people met, was through families and friends. And that is still a viable way to meet people. But ask yourself a question. When your cousin comes along and says, hey, I'm having a family function, or I'm having a function with some of my friends and I want to bring you along, are you saying yes to those? Or are you like, no, because I won't know anybody there and I'll be all nervous and this and that? Well, now you're just making excuses to not meet people. And you're making excuses to not go out there and potentially find a match that God may have ordained for you. Something to think about. Also, you need to start developing a healthier mindset. Get away from this idea of being a person that waits around for the world to happen to them, and start realizing that you make your world happen. God's going to play his part in enhancing your world, but only if you're doing things to also better it. And so it might mean, as uncomfortable as you are, you go out there and you take an improv class, or you go out there and you take go to a networking event. You go to downtown and decide I'm going to walk around, or, we have like a lot of various things out here people can do for activities. There's match meetups and things. But the point is that you got to develop a healthier mindset around this idea that it's perfectly fine for you to be a willing participant in your dating life, and that it's not dependent upon just God. God's got 8 billion other people to worry about, in addition to probably his own stuff happening in heaven. So he cares about you to a certain extent, but it's like he's going to help the people out more that are actually putting themselves out there and doing their part, because you can't lay it all on him, And so once you get this idea out of your head that you got to be a person that's waiting for stuff to happen, and that you put yourself out there, you're going to find the results you get are going to be a lot better. And hey, it may take some time to get used to it. Like if you've been sitting around for 30 or 40 years waiting for God to do some stuff, you might not be in the practice of knowing what things to do in order to actively help yourself get a better dating life. My website, introvertdatingsuccess.com, is designed to help you with that, especially if you're a guy, in terms of giving you a leg up on, okay, how do people want to be talked to and how can you better approach people and what activities should you be doing in order to facilitate attraction and relationship and fostering true connection. Those things can be learned. You can learn all these things because I don't want you to also think that, well, if when God finds that person, I'll just magically know what to do and how to be, because you've probably actually had people in your life that would have worked out, but you didn't have the skill set or know-how to keep them around because, like I said earlier, relationships take work. They take knowing how to be emotionally stable when you hear something from the person you're dating that you don't like, or criticisms about yourself that you didn't want to fix, but now you kind of have to, or knowing that there might be something you want to do, but it's not to the betterment of that other person and what that looks like and how you can compromise. Like, these are all skill sets and tools that you need that if you've just been waiting around, you have not properly developed. And I got a lot of great resources, both on my YouTube channel as well as at my website, that can help you with that. All right. And then lastly, very, very important, I'm not trying to take God out of the equation of your love life. You still need to be able to trust in God's guidance while at the same time taking action. So this is what that looks like. You pray to God for wisdom. You say, hey, I'm looking for this kind of person, and I'm going to trust that you're going to bring that kind of person into my life and give me the discernment that's going to allow me to tell who that kind of person is. And yes, that person is perfectly fine to have flaws in them, but those flaws aren't going to be a complete detriment to the bond and relationship we're going to have. So you make those prayers, and then at the same time, you follow through on your part of being proactive. If you're looking for somebody that is a believer, great. Look for people that are in the church that seemingly are active believers, but don't go to church just being like, okay, I'm at church now, I'm just going to sit here and wait. Because that's still you waiting on God to just bring somebody into your lap. And the reality is, I'll tell women on the guy side of things, when we do go to church, we're not always aware of, are women actually wanting us to approach or not? And I get, you're probably thinking, well, I don't know if I should approach a guy or if he wants me to approach. I will tell you, most guys want you to approach or want to be talked to. But on the guy side of things, we do better with like you putting forth indicators that indicate to us that you're actually wanting us to approach you, you looking at us for a little bit, or you coming over after church saying, hey, so, what did you think about the lesson we just learned or whatever? Like, you making yourself available in some capacity lets guys know that you are open to the idea of at least talking to them. And a lot of guys don't even feel like these days women want to talk to them. So you ain't got to come up and say, hey, so you're so hot and this and that, but just going up and saying and letting them know you're open to talking to them. That I know in churches a lot of times they'll do the whole thing of like, hey, while we're playing this song, greet your new neighbor. They do that in Baptist churches a lot. The whole like greet your neighbor or say hi to somebody. That could be your opportunity to say, hey, so-and-so, I'm so-and-so, what's your name? Oh, yeah, nice. You're sitting next to me like, what made you come to this church? Blah, blah, blah. Now you're starting a conversation. Guys, I've talked to you on this channel tons of times about what you could be doing to approach women. So look at some of those videos, but suffice to say, yeah, you could do that same trick. For those of you that go to Baptist churches, that is the easy way to start talking to somebody. And then afterwards, hey, what do you think about the service and this and that? I'm so-and-so, whatever. But start going to more events at your practice religion, Catholic religions, Jewish religions, all these places typically have events where the whole church comes out and they, have a thing where they are having a food celebration or a fundraiser or whatever. They're helping the community. Go to more of those events. Put yourself out there. Be proactive in your own love story. Lastly, I want to conclude with a joke that I found online that I think perfectly illustrates this concept that I've been talking about, all right? So it goes like this. Here's the joke. A storm descends on a small town, and the downpour soon turns into a flood. As the water starts to rise, the local preacher kneels in prayer on the church porch, surrounded by water. And by, one of the town folks comes up the street in a canoe. And he says, you better get in, preacher. The water is rising fast. No, says the preacher, I have faith in the Lord. The Lord will save me. And then so the waters continue to rise. And so at this point, the preacher has now climbed up to the balcony and he's wringing his hands and he's like praying and praying to God to save him. And then another guy zips by in a motorboat. Guy says, come on, preacher, we need to get you out of here. The levee's going to break any minute. And once again, the preacher is unmoved. He says, I shall remain. The Lord will see me through. After a while, the levee breaks and the flood is rushing over the church until only the steeple remains. So the preacher has gotten to the steeple and he's clinging to the cross. He's praying to God and he sees a helicopter come by, descends out of the clouds, and a state trooper calls down through a megaphone, hey, grab this ladder. Preacher, this is your last chance. Grab the ladder. We're here to save you. Once again, the preacher insists, no, 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 no. The Lord is going to help me. He will deliver me. And so the guy drowns. So the preacher drowns. And then because he was such a good guy on earth, he goes up to heaven. And he finally gets an interview with God. And he asks God, he says, Lord, I had unwavering faith in you. Why, oh, why did you not deliver me from that flood? And God just shakes his head. And God says, what did you want from me? I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter. And I think this ultimately speaks to what I've been talking about. If you've been sitting there thinking to yourself, God's going to bring somebody by for me, that God's going to provide for me a mate of some kind, you're not noticing that God's already done that. God has made a world where it's half and half, 4 billion women, 4 billion men, give or take a few numbers here or there. God has provided you with feet to walk to various places. He's provided churches. He's provided meeting places. He's provided dating apps. He's provided people that know people that can connect you. He's created all these various ways for you to be able to meet and connect with somebody. And if you're still sitting there thinking, but God's going to do his part eventually to bring somebody to me, he's already done that. And if you have not recognized that up to this point, then I feel sorry for whatever you've been made to believe based on your church teachings or this idea that, no, God's going to specifically do the action of molding a person and then putting him in front of you and saying, here's your person. That's not what God does. What God has done, though, is he's made all these other ways for you to meet people. And all he's saying to do on your end is to go forth and do the work to meet up with people and do the opportunities that I've already created for you to meet those people. So I stress this. Please, 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 if you've been up to this point believing the lie that all you got to do to get a mate is sit around and wait for God for him to make it happen, that's not going to be a thing, because he's creating things around you that are saying these are opportunities and ways for you to make it happen. Now go forth and do that. I'm giving you discernment to tell what the good situations are, but I've done my part. Learn to do your part, learn to be proactive, learn to put yourself out there. And with all that said, like I've said before, you may not have the skill set necessary. You may not understand. Part of your holding back is you're thinking if you just rely on God to do it, then you don't have to worry about any missteps you'll make, because there will be no missteps if God's in it. Plenty of people have taken good relationships and turned them to crap because they don't have the necessary skill sets required to make a relationship work long term. And I'm all about, yes, God's going to do his part, but if you're not working on your end to better yourself, to know how to talk to people, to know what other people need in a relationship, then all this is going to be for naught when God finally brings that person to you. And even a person that God brings to you, you can still mess up. So this is why I have a whole channel that's designed to help people learn the ins and outs of how dating and attraction works, because those skill sets are important. God created those skill sets so you would better know how to handle yourself in a relationship. And I would love to help you be a part of that journey. So if you like what you've heard here today, then if nothing else, consider watching more of my videos on YouTube, subscribing and listening to all that stuff. If you want more in-depth learning, you can go to introvertdatingsuccess.com, check out my ebooks, my audiobooks, and my various programs that will better help you position yourself so that way when that right person comes along, you actually know how to make that last long term. So hopefully some of what I've said today has helped you out. I just really feel for church people because I grew up in the church and I've seen so many of them that have died single. And these are people that wanted relationships and that wanted to be with somebody, but they were just sitting there waiting on God. And then they get to their 70s and 80s and they're still single and they've spent their whole life waiting. And God doesn't want us to wait. God wants us to use the things that he's already created to help ourselves. As a sidebar conversation, I play a lot of Legend of Zelda. I've been playing Tears of the Kingdom as of late, again, for the second time. And it's like, there's so many cool things to do in that game. But Link as a character can't actually do anything unless I make him move. So in that sense, it's like, to Link, I will be the person that's like controlling the narrative, but you have to give Link tools in the game in order to help him do these various objectives. And so think of God that way. You're Link and God is the person controlling the game, and he's got apples and arrows and things around, and he's saying, hey, look, I got apples and arrows. If you don't move in those directions, then what are you doing with your life, So anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this special Sunday episode. If you know somebody out there that's been doing the whole, I'm waiting for God to bring me a person, please send them this episode, because they really need to like get that thought process out of their head and realize that God's already doing his part, and they need to really put some work in if they want the love life that they speak of, you know? So thank you all for tuning in. I'm Harry Wilmington. I do these lives quite frequently, so feel free to go to my website and sign up for the newsletter. You can also sign up on YouTube just by subscribing, so you'll be notified when I do these kind of videos, and I will talk to you all soon. For now, happy Sunday, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace.